Vince Donovan had been out of the game for 5 years. After a disastrous heist in Amsterdam that saw his crew get caught and his name tarnished, Vince went off the radar, carefully hiding under the alias of a small-time businessman. But the world he once ruled in the underground had never stopped calling him back. In his quiet moments, Vince would trace his fingers over old plans, reminisce about the thrill of the chase, and daydream about his one great obsession, the perfect heist. But he wasn't interested in small jobs anymore. The usual targets, banks, jewelers, armored trucks, no longer held the allure they once did. He wanted something big, something monumental. He wanted a challenge that could redeem his name in the criminal underworld. That challenge came in the form of the Vault, a fortress-like, high-tech facility hidden in the heart of the city that housed the largest private collection of gold bars in the world, with a value topping £1 billion. The vault belonged to Harrison & Sons Bank, a shadowy financial institution that served elite clients. The bank had always been under tight security, and its reputation as impenetrable was legendary. But Vince knew better than anyone else, every system has a weakness, and he was going to exploit it. Vince knew he couldn't do this alone. A plan this ambitious required a skilled, loyal, and professional crew. The team had to be made up of people with expertise, but also with the ability to keep their cool under pressure. Vince spent weeks recruiting the best of the best from his old contacts, each a master of their craft. Mila the Hacker Garcia. Mila had been one of the best hackers Vince had ever worked with. She had the skills to crack even the most secure systems. During their last job, Mila's code had been instrumental in cracking a vault in Paris. She was tech-savvy, fearless, and ruthless when it came to getting into secure networks. The fact that Mila could control the security systems of an entire building from a single laptop made her invaluable. Rick the Muscle Harris. Rick was former military. A towering figure with a no-nonsense attitude, Rick's role was to handle anything that required physical muscle. He was a natural at neutralizing threats and had a history of dealing with security personnel. His calm demeanor in high-pressure situations made him Vince's right-hand man. Clara the Insider Meadows. Clara had grown up in the financial world, working as an assistant to a senior executive at Harrison & Sons Bank. While she wasn't part of the criminal world by nature, Clara had been an invaluable source of information in the past. Vince knew she could provide him with the critical inside intel needed to navigate the bank's operations. She would also be crucial in bypassing any human errors that could lead to detection. James the Safecracker Lee, a master locksmith and safecracker, James had an unparalleled ability to crack open the most advanced safes in the world. He could open any vault or safe in under 5 minutes. His quiet, calculated approach would be essential for cracking the vault once the team got inside. Vince spent weeks meticulously planning every aspect of the heist. He drew blueprints of the bank and studied them from every angle. The vault, however, was the real puzzle. Vince had already gathered as much information as possible. The vault was impenetrable, with thick steel walls, biometric scanners, motion detectors, infrared cameras, and pressure-sensitive floors. It was said to be unbreakable. But Vince had found a weakness: the old tunnel system. The tunnels, once used during the Cold War to transport valuables, were still functional, but largely forgotten. The bank's elite clientele didn't know about them. Vince's plan involved gaining access to these tunnels and using them to enter the bank's main floor. From there, Mila would disable the security, Clara would get them access to the vault's outer doors, and James would open the vault itself. The team's escape route was even more ingenious. Once they had the gold, they would use a secondary tunnel that led out of the city, cutting off any police pursuit. With everything in place, Vince spent the next few weeks moving silently through the motions. Mila began hacking into the bank systems, making subtle changes that would ensure they had full access to the network. Clara's position inside the bank allowed her to gather intel on the staff, the guards, and the exact schedules of the bank's operations. The crew began infiltrating the city under the cover of darkness. Rick set up a safe house on the outskirts of town, where they could hide out if anything went wrong. James worked on disabling various locks and safes as a practice to ensure everything would go smoothly. Meanwhile, Vince kept his focus. He knew that any slip-up, no matter how small, could jeopardize the entire operation. The stakes were high. This wasn't just about the gold, it was about restoring his reputation and making history. Everything was going according to plan. Vince had just completed his final walkthrough when an unexpected problem arose. Clara, on one of her regular visits to the bank, noticed a new security officer had been assigned to the building. His name was Tom Reynolds, a former military man with a reputation for being thorough. Clara learned that Reynolds had been assigned to replace an older guard who had been known for his lax attitude. Vince realized this could be a significant obstacle. Reynolds was too observant, and he had a sharp eye for detail. Vince immediately instructed Clara to start gathering intel on Reynolds. She learned that he had access to the surveillance systems, and that made him a potential threat. He was scheduled to work the night of the heist, but Vince needed to act quickly to ensure he wouldn't compromise their plans. As Clara continued to gather information, she realized that Reynolds had noticed something strange. Clara's cover was beginning to crumble, and Vince knew that if Reynolds connected the dots, the whole team would be at risk. The clock was ticking, and Vince had only 2 days to ensure the heist would go ahead as planned. In a final, desperate attempt to maintain control, Vince planned to accelerate the operation. The crew would go in earlier than scheduled, hoping to catch Reynolds off guard. But with Clara's cover possibly blown and time running out, the first cracks in Vince's perfect plan began to appear. Cliffhanger, Clara calls Vince in the dead of night, her voice trembling. "I think he's on to me, Vince. I need you to make a decision. Now." The night before the heist, the crew gathered at their safe house. The quiet, unassuming location had been the base for weeks, and now it was time to prepare for the culmination of everything they had planned. Vince paced back and forth, reviewing the final details in his head. "It's showtime," Vince muttered to himself. "Everyone's in position. Mila, you've got the control room." Mila nodded, her fingers tapping a few keys on her laptop. "The network's as clean as it's going to get. I've rerouted the surveillance feed, and I can loop it for up to an hour. But we need to move fast." Rick, standing by the window and checking his gear, glanced over his shoulder. "Fast isn't the problem. Keeping it clean is. We can't leave a trace." Clara, sitting across the table, nervously fiddled with a pen. "I'll be ready inside. I've worked out the guard schedules, and Reynolds is due for his shift just after midnight. I'll make sure the timing's perfect." Vince surveyed the room, his eyes sharp and calculating. Each member of the crew was important, and they all knew their roles intimately. But tonight, it wasn't just about skill, it was about trust. "Everyone knows what they're doing," Vince said firmly. "Stick to the plan. No deviations. If something goes wrong, we abort. Got it?" They all nodded, the weight of the task ahead settling in. The team was ready, but Vince couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Clara's cover might be blown, and Reynolds could be the wild card that derails the whole plan. As midnight approached, the team was in motion. Mila was at her laptop, sitting in a parked van a few blocks away from the bank, monitoring the security feed. Rick and James were making their way toward the back of the bank, hidden in the shadows, with Clara already inside, blending in with the late-night office workers. But everything didn't go according to plan. Vince had just entered the main tunnel, the first step of their journey into the bank's underground systems, when Mila's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Vince, we have a problem. The surveillance feed, it's glitching. The cameras on the north side aren't looping properly. They're out of sync." Vince's heart raced. "What do you mean out of sync?" Mila's voice was calm but urgent. "It's not a full breach. I'm rerouting the signal, but it's going to take a couple of minutes to get it back on track. You need to stall until I get this fixed." Vince clenched his jaw. "How long?" "I'm working on it. Just hang tight." The tension in the air grew thick. Vince knew they had less than an hour before the guards started making their rounds. If they didn't get the security system back up, the team would be exposed. Vince signaled Rick and James to hold off. They were positioned outside the vault area, waiting for the signal to move in. But the unexpected delay meant they had to remain in hiding, unsure if they would be caught before the cameras were back online. Clara, meanwhile, was trying to keep up appearances inside the bank. She had spent the last few hours collecting intel on Reynolds and the security protocols. She knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move, but now she had to make sure that the guards didn't get suspicious. "I've got Reynolds in my sights," Clara whispered into her comms. "He's near the surveillance room. If he's watching the cameras, I won't be able to bypass them in time." Vince's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped to avoid this confrontation, but it seemed inevitable. "How close is he to the main server?" "Very close," Clara replied. "I'll have to take a detour, but I can get there before he does. Just keep the team back for now." With Clara on her way to neutralize the threat, Vince moved cautiously through the darkened tunnel, his footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. The last thing he needed was for someone to hear them. The tunnel system was narrow and winding, but it was their best shot at getting close to the bank unnoticed. As Vince crept forward, the crackle of his earpiece brought him back to reality. "Mila, how are we looking?" "Almost there," Mila responded. "Just need another minute." "Hold tight, Vince." Suddenly, the earpiece went silent. Vince's heart stopped for a moment, and then Mila's voice came back through with a tone of urgency. "Vince, get ready!" "I've rerouted the feed, but I don't have full control of the system. You'll have about 10 minutes before they realize something's wrong. You need to move now." Vince nodded to himself, pushing forward. The heist was in its most critical phase. They had the gold, but everything hinged on their ability to get in and out without leaving a trace. Rick and James were already in position by the vault doors. "We're ready to go," Rick's voice came through. "Tell us when." Vince checked his watch. "We have exactly 10 minutes. Go now!" The team moved with precision. Mila, still managing the security feed from her laptop, monitored the bank's surveillance systems while keeping one eye on the guards' movements. Clara had made her way to the server room, bypassing Reynolds and cutting off his access to the monitoring system. "We're good," Clara confirmed, her voice tense but relieved. "I've got the door open. You've got 5 minutes before he realizes I've gone." With that, the team surged forward. Rick and James made their way to the vault, using their tools to quietly crack open the massive door. The security measures on the vault were formidable, but James's steady hand worked through them with ease. Meanwhile, Vince stood guard, watching the timer tick down. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. He couldn't afford any mistakes now. Just as James finished unlocking the vault, a new complication arose. From the corner of Vince's eye, he saw a shadow moving toward the entrance. "Someone's coming," he whispered urgently into his earpiece. "We've got company." The figure was a security guard, likely doing a final sweep of the area before the shift change. Vince motioned for the team to freeze. They couldn't afford to be seen, not now, not when they were so close. The guard turned the corner, and Vince held his breath. The slightest movement could give them away. But just as the guard stepped closer, Clara appeared, slipping out from the shadows. She knocked him out with a quick but silent blow to the back of the head. Vince breathed a sigh of relief, but the relief was short-lived. "Get in the vault, now!" Vince barked. As the team rushed forward to secure the gold, Vince checked his watch again. They were out of time. The police would be on their way soon. The next few minutes would determine their fates. The door of the vault creaked open, the heavy steel door groaning under the force of the mechanisms James had expertly manipulated. Inside, the team stood in awe. Gold bars stacked neatly from floor to ceiling, their value almost unimaginable. Vince's eyes gleamed with a mix of admiration and calculated focus. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was just beginning. "Holy hell," Rick muttered under his breath, running a gloved hand over one of the bars. "This is it. All of it." Vince ignored Rick's awe and gave a nod to James, who was already starting to lift the bars from their neatly stacked positions, preparing them for transport. "We need to move fast," Vince reminded the team. "No time to gawk. Let's load up." Mila's voice crackled through their earpieces as she watched the security feeds from her van. The security system is still compromised, but it won't be long before they notice. You've got exactly 15 minutes before the backup systems kick in. You need to be out of there by then. James, with his tools already in place, began the delicate work of disabling the vault's alarm system. I've got this, Vince. Just keep an eye out for anything else. Clara was by the vault's entrance, keeping watch for any incoming guards or security personnel who might have wandered into the wrong area. She felt a chill of anxiety run down her spine, knowing that the slightest misstep could blow everything they'd worked for. We're good, for now, Clara whispered into her comms. No one's coming, and everything's on schedule. As they continued to load the gold, an unexpected sound caused Vince's pulse to spike, a door opening. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. The team froze, eyes wide with alarm. Vince's heart raced, and his first instinct was to make a run for it, but there was nowhere to hide. The only option was to stay still and pray they hadn't been spotted. Shit, Rick muttered, his hand hovering over the gun tucked in his waistband. What now? Vince quickly scanned the room. The vault was hidden from view, but if the guard walked past the entrance, it would be too late. They would have to act fast. Everyone, stay quiet. Don't move, Vince whispered sharply. He crouched low, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. The footsteps grew louder, and then, just as the guard came into sight, a figure emerged from the shadows, Clara. She had timed it perfectly, stepping forward with her hands raised in a placating gesture, hoping to avoid any conflict. Is there a problem, officer? Clara asked, her voice steady, but her heart was pounding. She had been trained for moments like this. If she could talk her way out, they might still have a shot. The guard, a younger man with a bored expression, glanced at Clara. He was holding a flashlight and appeared to be doing a routine check. But then he looked down the hallway, toward the vault entrance, his brow furrowing in suspicion. I'm just checking the floor, the guard muttered, his gaze flicking nervously back toward the vault. Clara took a step closer to him, her calm demeanor beginning to settle him down. I can help with that, she said, stepping in his path. I'm just the assistant. If you need someone to check the vault. The guard hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning her face. Clara's heart skipped. The tension was unbearable. But then, with a shrug, the guard turned back to the hallway and waved his flashlight toward the other end of the floor. All right, but make sure no one touches the vault, he said, walking away with his back turned. Clara exhaled sharply, her body relaxing as she watched him disappear down the corridor. But her relief was short-lived. That was too close, Vince muttered, rising from his crouched position. We don't have time for mistakes. Let's move. With the guard gone, the crew worked at a feverish pace. They had 10 minutes to finish loading the gold and get out. Mila, watching the security feeds from her van, gave a quick update. You've got 9 minutes. The backup systems are about to kick in. You need to hurry. The team, moving with precision, packed the gold into large, heavy duffel bags. James was working furiously to disable any remaining alarm systems, but his nerves were on edge. Every beep of the security system made his stomach churn. It's now or never, he muttered. Rick moved swiftly, carrying the bags toward the exit, while Clara kept a lookout. Vince was the last to leave the vault, double-checking that nothing was left behind. He scanned the room one last time, ensuring they hadn't left a trace. As Vince turned to head out, a soft sound echoed through the vault, the distinct beep of an alarm. Shit, Vince whispered under his breath. We're out of time. We need to go. Now. The backup security systems had activated. The vault door slammed shut with a deafening clang. Mila's voice cut through the earpiece. They're on to you. They've got visual confirmation. Move, move, move. Vince didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the bags of gold and rushed toward the tunnel exit, his heart hammering in his chest. Rick was already ahead, moving fast, with Clara right behind him. The escape route was supposed to be a secure tunnel system beneath the bank, leading to a hidden exit. But as the team descended deeper into the tunnels, the sound of sirens grew louder. Vince's heart raced as the echoes of police cars filled the air. "This is going to be close," Rick grunted, running full speed through the dimly lit tunnel. "Where's the exit?" "Straight ahead," Vince barked, leading the way. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. The weight of the gold bags seemed heavier with every step. The police were closing in, and every second mattered. As they neared the exit, the team heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind them. "They're right behind us," Clara shouted. Vince had one final option. "There's an old drainage tunnel up ahead. If we take a left, we can lose them in the sewers. It's the only way." The team turned and sprinted for the left turn. They entered the drainage tunnel, the sound of rushing water filling their ears. It was dark, cold, and wet, but it was their only chance. The police weren't far behind. Vince glanced back, seeing the faint flashlights of officers trying to catch up. He pushed harder, knowing that the end of the tunnel, the end of their escape, was just ahead. As they neared the tunnel's exit, Vince felt something cold and hard at his back. He spun around, his hand instinctively going to his gun. "Hold it right there." Standing in the tunnel entrance, illuminated by the flickering lights from the police flashlights, was none other than Detective Harrow. "It's over, Vince. You're not getting away this time." Vince froze, the weight of the gold bags dragging him down. The heist had been perfectly executed up until now, but the final moment was filled with betrayal, loss, and a sense of inevitability. "You always were one step behind, Harrow," Vince said with a smile, though his heart pounded in his chest. "This is it," Harrow said coldly. "You're done." The dim glow of the police flashlights flickered in the narrow drainage tunnel. Vince felt his heart race as Detective Harrow stood between him and freedom. The stench of wet stone and sewage filled the air, mingling with the metallic scent of sweat and fear. The weight of the gold bags on his back felt heavier now, like a tangible reminder of how close they were to losing it all. "You're cornered, Vince," Harrow's voice was calm but filled with determination. He knew this was his moment, the one chance to finally bring down the criminal mastermind that had eluded him for years. Vince didn't move. The gun tucked inside his jacket was within reach, but he knew that firing at Harrow would only escalate things further. The escape route he'd been counting on, the drainage tunnel, had been compromised. Now, there was no turning back. "You think you've got me, Harrow? You've been chasing shadows. I've always been one step ahead, and I will be until the end." Harrow's expression hardened. "You're wrong this time. This ends tonight." As Harrow took a step forward, Vince's crew stood behind him, their faces tense. Rick clenched his fists, ready for a fight, while Clara's eyes darted around, searching for an exit. James was quiet, his body poised, waiting for Vince to give the signal. The sound of sirens grew louder from outside the tunnel, and Vince knew they couldn't stand still much longer. The police were closing in on both ends. The weight of their stolen fortune felt unbearable in that moment. He had to act. "Clara, the exit!" Vince barked, his voice cutting through the tension. He knew they had one shot at getting out alive. Clara nodded, taking a calculated glance at the path ahead. The tunnel veered off to the left, leading to an underground drainage grate that would lead them into the city's sewer system. It was their last chance. "Let's go!" Vince shouted. As the crew began to move, a sudden crackling sound came through their earpieces. Mila's voice rang out, distorted by static. "Vince, they've got the entire perimeter blocked off. We're trapped. They're going to be on us in minutes." Rick's eyes widened. "No! We're not going down like this." He started moving toward the rear of the tunnel, his hand reaching for the gun at his waist. But before anyone could act, Vince felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "Stop!" he shouted, his eyes flicking to the side. "Don't move!" Rick froze, confused. "What's going on?" Vince's gaze locked onto Clara. Her face, usually calm and collected, now showed a flicker of something else, fear, guilt, or perhaps something worse. Clara, Vince's voice dropped, a cold realization settling over him. What the hell is going on? Clara's eyes darted away from his. She started, but the words were choked in her throat. It was too late for explanations. The truth came crashing down in an instant. You sold us out. Vince's voice was icy, his heart pounding in his chest. You've been working with the police all along, haven't you? Clara's face twisted with regret, but she didn't deny it. I had no choice, Vince. They have my family. They told me if I didn't help, they would. Vince's fist clenched, his thoughts racing. Betrayed. He had trusted Clara, and now the entire heist was in jeopardy because of her. You lied to us. Rick shouted, his voice full of fury. You think we're just going to walk out of here, after everything? Vince didn't have time for the argument. The police were closing in, and there was no way out unless they moved fast. But Clara's betrayal had shaken the team to its core. We're not done yet, Vince said, his voice cutting through the chaos. We'll deal with Clara later. Right now, we get out of here. The crew sprinted down the tunnel, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. Vince led the way, Clara reluctantly following behind him. Rick and James were close behind, their eyes scanning for any signs of police officers. They had to reach the sewer entrance before the police cut them off. Clara, her heart heavy with guilt, could barely keep up. She glanced over her shoulder, knowing that the betrayal would cost her everything, but she had no choice. I'm sorry, she whispered under her breath, though she knew no one could hear her. As they neared the end of the tunnel, the dim light from the sewer grate above flickered in the distance. But just as they reached the grate, they heard the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the concrete. The police were closing in. Move faster! Vince shouted, his pulse quickening. He reached the grate first, pulling it open with a grunt. The smell of stagnant water hit them immediately, but there was no time to hesitate. The team scrambled through the narrow opening, one by one, diving into the murky water below. Vince was the last to enter, glancing back one final time to see the flashing lights of the police vehicles just outside the tunnel. They were so close, yet so far away. Get to the other side! Vince shouted, his voice strained. They waded through the filthy water, the sound of sirens growing fainter as they moved deeper into the city's sewer system. The escape route was tight, dark, and claustrophobic, but it was their only chance. Rick, who had been the most vocal during the escape, fell into a grim silence. We've got to lay low for a while. They'll be watching every exit. We don't have time, Vince replied. We need to split up. Head for the safe house. We'll regroup later. The crew reached the end of the sewer system hours later, each of them drenched, exhausted, and defeated. They had escaped, but at what cost? Vince took a moment to survey the group, his eyes locking onto Clara. She stood at the back, her shoulders slumped in shame. She had betrayed them, but her actions had ensured that they made it out alive, albeit at the expense of trust and camaraderie. We're not done, Vince said, breaking the silence. We've got the gold, but we still have to disappear. The police will be hunting us down. We need to vanish, or this whole thing was for nothing. Rick let out a heavy sigh. We're lucky we're even here. That was way too close. Clara stepped forward, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. But I helped you escape, didn't I? Please, understand. Vince didn't respond immediately. He needed time to process everything, the betrayal, the heist, and what lay ahead. They had won, but the battle was far from over. The crew scattered to their separate locations. Vince, now alone with the gold, realized that even though they had pulled off the heist of the century, they hadn't escaped unscathed. The price of their success was much higher than he had anticipated. We're out, he muttered, looking at the bags of gold. But at what cost? As the screen faded to black, the sounds of distant sirens filled the air, leaving a question lingering in the darkness. Would Vince and his crew ever truly be free?